wonderful panelists for joining us tonight. And of course, all of you for joining us on all our platforms on ABC13. We appreciate you very, very much. COVID-19 has impacted so much of the Asian American community. I think for many Asian Americans, they were very, very well aware of this growing pandemic early on because they had family and relatives in China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, those regions where the very earliest part of COVID-19 began. And even before the pandemic itself made it onto the shore of the United States, Asian American community members were already feeling the effects of what's going on in the decrease in business and increase in scrutiny. In fact, the first topic we want to talk about is this rise in so-called Asian American sort of racism or targeted harassment, if you will. We've seen some reports of that throughout the country. And Mustafa, I want to start with you, having worked and consulted on similar issues at the Department of Homeland Security. Talk to us about what people were facing when it came to the rise in Asian American racism and discrimination in our community, something we saw almost immediately after the pandemic began making national news.
Well, Maya, it's a double-edged sword. One, you're facing the pandemic like all other Americans. You're doing social distancing. You're losing business because we're doing social distancing. But the bigger challenge that you run into on top of that is how people look at you and what they say, the slurs that our young people have to deal with. Those are real challenges beyond just as Americans that you mentioned. And so I think that it is up to government officials, it's up to other community leaders to make clear that there is no place for hate in our conversation. The pandemic knows no boundaries, whether it's county, city, or nations. It affects all of us. And I think that it's being used as a political hot potato in a way and being placed in Asian Americans when it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think you made some very good points there. And next I want to go to Chief Gore. And a viewer named John asked a question because we actually asked some ABC13 viewers to submit their questions. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out when is it just racism that makes us uncomfortable, when it becomes dangerous. He says when we're in physical danger because of racism, of course we have to call 911. But what about when we experience racism in other forms? Whom do we report or ask for support? I think when should people call HPD and when should they not? Sometimes for Asian Americans, they're not sure where the line is, if there even is one.
Yeah, there's a lot of good points you bring up there, Maya. And, coming from a family myself where, they would probably wonder, what do I do or who do I call? Always, if it's an emergency, life-threatening, 911. If it's a non-emergency, 713-884-3131. You don't have to worry about writing it down. You can always look it up, houstonpolice.org. All our contact ways and methods are on it. But getting back to, hey, is this just hate speech? Hey, is this just a racial epithet? Hey, is this a threat? Ask those questions of us and we can tell you, hey, if a crime was committed. If I can tell you this, Maya, I know a lot of that rhetoric is out there. It's probably a lot of it is on social media and all those things, but our numbers as far as hate crimes and stuff like that, they don't show. I mean, that's the silver lining if you want to look at it, or in terms of glass half full. Those are positive things about it. I'm not saying those things aren't going on. And just to tell you about the numbers, there has not been a single instance of hate crime against Asians committed. Now, when I say that, please be careful. When I mean there's a very specific definition of a hate crime. It had to have been done with bias because of a person's race, ethnicity. There's a whole laundry list of criteria it has to meet before it gets classified as a hate crime. But again, a lot of times when a hate crime does occur, it's either goes into a line of maybe the horrible crimes you hear out there are either murder, arson, vandalism. And again, it has to be going to the classification of a criminal offense against a person because of, in this case, we're talking about in whole or part because of their race or religion. And, there's a whole laundry list of other things that can also be, for it to be a hate crime.
And Chief, you're so right, but we know a lot of things go on, right? In Midland at that Sam's a couple of months ago, you had a family of three, a father and his two kids were stabbed because the suspect apparently thought he was Chinese, and he's not even Chinese. He just happened to be Asian. FBI is looking into that. And Debbie, this is where I want to bring you in. And I know we have some slides of where people can actually report crimes and other instances that we know these incidents occur. And for our community, for a lot of folks who this might be their first generation or they're immigrants, they're reluctant to report crimes, whether it's actual crimes where things are stolen or just harassment. So what do you say to the folks? And we see some websites right there that people can go to and really kind of report their incidents and speak out, because we know what's out there, and the statistics doesn't show it. It's certainly a situation where we want the statistics to speak for us and to reflect what we are seeing on the ground accurately.
That's exactly it. I think a lot of immigrants especially have this tendency to just let things roll by and not want to create waves, especially in the Asian American community. There's a real conscious effort of wanting to fit in because we're so oftentimes looked at as if we're foreigners, even though Asian Americans have been in this country for generations, right? Chinese Americans have been here since the Civil War. I would really encourage everyone to report it. If it's serious enough, report it to the police. If you're not sure if it's serious enough, report it to the police, right? And then be sure to report it to one of these 4 sites that Maya just had up on the screen. AAPIHateCrimes.org. Document it. It could be anything as simple as a verbal harassment. You're at a grocery store and someone's just, yells at you and says, go back to where you came from. Those are things that we want to document and track because it gives credibility that this is, and it's documentation that this is actually happening so that people can approach it, can try to address it.
And it is a challenge indeed. And Chloe, I want to ask you, you're a family of immigrants. There's 8 sisters of you, and your mom is such a force with all your siblings. And of course, you're a very successful designer, but all these stories are not things that are unfamiliar to you. And I wanted to talk to you about a viewer comment that we had. Someone wrote in, Alice says she is an immigrant of Asian descent who entered the U.S. many years ago. She said sometimes it feels like the city of opportunity she moved to doesn't always feel welcoming anymore. That when she got on Metro back in February, there were bus operators informing Asian passengers that needed to remove their masks before boarding the bus, or even questioning if we have the virus. When you hear stories like that about people who look like you and me, even after they've obtained success in this country, what are your thoughts on that issue, Chloe? Up. I think Chloe needs to unmute herself. Unmute yourself. There you go. Now we can hear you.
So it really breaks my heart. And I think this is where we have to be more, instead of Asian American, be more American-like. We need to break our stereotype of being quiet. And I really agree with Debbie. Sometimes, especially if you're the first generation, it's hard to speak out. But this is where the second generation or the youth actually has to speak up for their parents or for their grandparents. This is where we actually have a voice and a platform, and we need to use it. So, if we don't share our story, no one's going to hear it and no one's going to respect it, and there's going to be no solution.
And now I want to bring in Paul Gore from the Asian Chamber, because you deal with so many of your membership are first generation and some are second generation, but they all have that common purpose of wanting to be successful in business. And this has just been so devastating for members of the Asian business community. Whether they experience racism or not, they're all impacted. Because Asiatown cleared out so quickly. We've covered it a lot on local media about how, one rumor on Twitter would just kill the business of one of the grocery stores in Asiatown by 50%, 70% overnight. And even before the pandemic got here, people were avoiding Asiatown, like somehow eating Chinese food versus eating spaghetti would increase your chance of getting the coronavirus. And there are still people who think like that. How has the chamber tried to tackle that issue?
Thank you for letting me be part of this, and it's a very big issue that we had starting in January. As you've heard, we had this particular thing that caused a lot of our businesses to drop probably by 70%. So the chamber, back in January, created a health forum that helped educate our business perspective, our community leaders, and that they were able to go back and tell our Asian community and also the Houston community that it was safe. The data at that time was safe, and it was just a rumor. And we basically encourage people to go back and eat and support the community. Mayor Turner was very supportive with that, and he actually went out and did a press conference, and even more so ate at different restaurants along with city leaders. And we were very grateful, and also tackling with helping social media. We had a lot of community partners that we want to say thank you to help fight this rumor that we had. And then the pandemic came, and now everything was shut down. And it's been really hard for Asian businesses, only because during that period they lost a lot of sales. And then when the shutdown happened, it just extended that whole aspect where a lot of businesses are really suffering because of what's happening and what's been going on in Asia town, and even more so here in Houston.
But how do you, really battle against the rhetoric? I want to bring in another viewer question, and Mustafa, maybe you can tackle this, and then maybe Debbie is the viewer question. Helen asks, prominent politicians in Texas, particularly some in Houston, have launched attacks and blame onto China for what is going on in the U.S. right now. How do such political attacks bring vulnerable to the AAPI community, especially the Chinese community? And I think what she's talking about is, for folks who might be wondering specifically, Kathleen Wall, who is in a runoff to be a congressional nominee in Fort Bend County, Congressional District 22, has really sent out some fiery mailers and ads which are very derogatory toward China and the Chinese people as a bid to win that nomination. And I think for Asian Americans, they found that very hurtful. And that's what Helen's talking about. How do we educate the public on the risk facing our community when someone uses this rhetoric? Like, eventually someone's going to believe that stuff. Mustafa, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I'll pick up on what Chloe said, right? I mean, there's a part of us that coming from our Asian roots sometimes wants to be of service, wants to show that we're not part of the problem, we're part of the solution. So you've seen many organizations, just from a civic standpoint, step up, give out masks, donate things, and be of service to the larger community to show we're part of the social fabric. And there's nothing wrong with that. We will continue to do that, pandemic or not. But what Chloe said really jumped out was that, there's an Asian part of us and an American part of us. And the American part of us wants to push back, right? The American part of us says that, I am as American as anybody else. And don't you dare look at me that way. Don't you dare say that about me. And so when Chief Goss says that there hasn't been a lot of hate crime incidents, right? Because there may have been incidents, but they didn't get reported. So what Debbie was saying about reporting these things, big and small, it's really, really important. And then for public officials that speak out and say that kind of rhetoric, well, let me remind all of us that, Fort Bend County is, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 4 people are of Asian descent. In the city of Sugar Land, where that district race is, 1 out of 3 people are of Asian descent. And so we need to be more politically engaged, and we need to be very clear about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, not just as Asian Americans, but as Americans.
It's very good points. And, and Chief Gall, you're in a, lack of a better, very mainstream American profession, being a police officer, public servant, first responder. How is your experience being there's been more Asian American police officers in HPD over the last 15, 20 years, but still a small minority in the greater scheme of things. Do you think that's really made an impact, presence like people like you out there to try to convince our community that it's okay to come forward and speak out when they are being victimized? I feel like that's still a challenge, even though you guys have made so much inroads.
Yeah, when I first joined the department back in the 90s, we only had about 100 or so Asian officers. Now we're almost at about 400. And, the percentages almost reflect the city. And the department itself is a majority department. I think we're blessed that way. I think that our department is very reflective of the diverse city that we live in. You really don't hear of too many issues as far as us having issues with engaging the city, when it comes to engaging a diverse city. In all the units, in all the commands, and all the stations I go to, we are a very diverse department. And, we don't plan for that because it just happens that way because, we are such a diverse department. And then we hear of issues such as this as far as, whether it be Asian American, whether it be another race. But, right now, Asian American is kind of highlighted because of the coronavirus and the China connection. If you bring it to any officer, on the department, they don't really think about it. We think more in terms right now of, hey, how do I engage the community to get their help in order to help us solve crimes? Those are the main things that are a lot of on officers' minds. But to your point, Maya, about, hey, how has us being a diverse agency help in handling this, coronavirus and, Asian American, I guess, discriminatory actions out there? I think it can only help us in many different ways. And what I see in the department is very positive in how we engage with the community and how we engage with the Asian community on the west side of town.
I want to move on to what Mustafa was talking about, was the whole mask thing. I think for many Asian Americans, what I've seen personally and out in the community over the last 2 months is that when our sort of backs are against the wall and we feel like there are a lot of things we can't do to help, we try to do what we can. And so many in the Asian community have been donating food and masks and just going out there doing what they can. I want to show, it's interesting because we have a couple of different mask stories, but I want to show Chloe's mask because she's a fashion designer. She'd be designing dresses and all that good stuff. But like many local fashion designers, she pivoted to making masks first as donations. And then I think a lot of people were clamoring for them. So I'll go with Chloe and then we'll move on to Debbie to talk about just, when we talk about, it's easy to talk, kind of get focused on the negative stuff. When we talk about the really positive things are things like this, what we're seeing right now. And tell me the response for you making the masks and what's it like to be able to go out there and donate them or make them available for sale for the community.
Can I talk about the education about how we're gonna? I just want to say something about how
of course.
I think the lesson starts at home. I don't think we should expect politicians to educate the masses. What I love about being in Houston is the diversity, and I have interns from Venezuela, I have interns from Abilene, Texas, and most of them actually never had Chinese food or Vietnamese food, but after interning with me, it's their favorite food. So I think it's all about education and just really, and it starts at home. I mean, if you are not racist at home, or no, I shouldn't say that word, but all this starts at home. So let's go back to the masks. I started on March 18th. I started on March 18th, and that's when we have, actually before we closed the store. And it feels amazing as a fashion designer because fashions, it's not life or death, but when we were starting to give donation, I mean, the kind of email that we were receiving, a lot of cancer patient, a lot of elderly, and this was before we actually pivoted to the medical community. We offer it free to the public, and the demand for it was really, really heartwarming and a little astounding. So it's wonderful to really, really help and saves people's lives. Sometimes that's a bit hard to think that you actually do that, but some of the cases they say we did. But it's been 8 weeks of making masks and donating masks now, and it's really, really hard. It's really heartbreaking and amazing at the same time, if that makes sense. That we have to. That is so many lack of supplies that the fashion industry has to step in.
And I think really, and Debbie, you can speak to that. It's almost like among some Asian Americans, there's such a hunger to donate PPEs to our hospitals and food and whatnot because it somehow proves that we're American enough. I think that's an issue. Right. You're trying to like say, well, you think this is a Chinese virus or a Wuhan virus, whatever, but we will donate all of these things to our community to show that we love our country just as quote unquote any other American. There's part of that feeling going on out there, don't you think? And I know you've done a lot of work donating, so we have some photos of that to show as well. But I feel like
there's definitely that that sentiment, right? What Paul had referred to earlier. There's a group of community leaders came together and within a week had raised $100,000 to donate meals to frontline workers. And that's, since then grown from $100,000 goal to $150,000 goal. And that's not counting the numerous other organizations and just individuals out there who are donating on their own, right? Or just their own circle of friends, whether it is masks or PPE materials or meals. And while that is wonderful and it does show the generosity and the investment that the Asian American community has, at the same time, I would encourage everyone to just remember three things, right? If you are Asian American and or even if you're not Asian American and you experience, a hate crime, a hate incident, or a bias, be sure to report it, right? That's the first thing. That's probably one of the freedoms of America that allows you to actually go and report it. The second most important thing is every Asian American should be filling out the census. If you want to show that you're an American, then you need to be counted as an American or just counted as somebody who is in this country, right? Whether you are documented or not. If you're a living, breathing human being, you need to get counted for the census, right? So I highly encourage that. And then lastly, the most American thing that any person can do is to register and go vote. If the Asian American community wants to be viewed as Americans, then we need to do the most fundamental piece of rights of being an American is our right to vote. And that's what I would encourage every Asian American to do. If you want to be counted, if you want to be viewed as American, then we need to participate as Americans. I think our community has demonstrated that. We've got the community service charity portion down, right? America is the most generous country in the world. Charity, charitable acts, nonprofit organizations, we probably are number one in the world. The next part of that for the Asian American community is we need to vote like we're Americans.
Registering to vote, filling out the census, just participating in all those engaging in all these civic activities, so important.
Very basic civic engagement things, basic rights, right? Basic yes. American duties.
Yes. And Paul, tell me about, from the Asian Chamber standpoint, I know, to pick up a little bit on what Debbie is saying, that the Chamber and a number of other organizations have been doing the salute to frontline workers, donating meals, making sure those who are making impact are recognized and feel loved from our community. But you have to balance that with trying to make sure that all your members, well, of course, encourage them to participate in the civic activities, but also stay afloat. So tell me, what are some of your success stories and some of your challenges in the last 8 weeks or so?
Yeah, thank you for sharing up. I want to just backtrack and talk more about proving, we're all Americans, right? We're the Asian community wanting to help, and we're being here as Americans and the Asian community. We're here to help. And it's all about advocacy groups. We're here to unite and to bring love and anti-discrimination. When we come together, we're going to plan to do something in June and give an ad out to talk about this. But it's about bringing the younger generation and making sure they understand just our journey and what it's all about and why we're here in this particular country of freedom. And I agree definitely with Debbie to talk about what we've been doing the past 8 weeks. We've been actually
sometimes it feels
busy.
Like 8 months, so I get it.
Yeah, it does. It does. We've been very busy. The community we've been doing as a business, as the Asian Chamber, we've been doing educational aspect. We don't have necessarily the fund, but we have the resources to help educate them. When we educate them, they're able to make good decisions. When they can make good decisions, they can help their business stay afloat. The other thing that we've also been doing is, like Debbie said, taking donations and donating PPEs to the particular organization and giving back to the community and letting them know that we care and we want them to be safe. When it was first in Asia, we sent masks and PPEs over there, and when it hit here, we saw and we rallied together as a coalition to be able to donate. when you talked about this salute, I don't know if you had a chance to see their ad this past Sunday or the weeks before. It's Salute Frontliners. We came up together collectively to say, hey, we want to do two things. Honor the people who are on the front line, who are fighting COVID-19, and even the healthcare workers. And the other aspect of it is help Asian-owned business restaurants. They, as we talked earlier, they are the ones that hurt. We took this aspect of using the funds that we bought meals for them and help restaurants be able to provide meals for the frontline workers. And that's
how bad are the Asian restaurants? Excuse me. Do you have any statistics, or are you guys looking into it? Because I mean, there are hundreds of Asian-owned restaurants, or thousands, and you just wonder how many of them are going to survive when it's all over.
And that's a hard statement to say, because a lot of them are just starting to run their business and they're really not sharing, and they're very private about how they share their information. But we also know that, again, they were hit. And let me just give you a landscape. When they were hit, because their cash flow was lost in February and then now March, and some of them had to let go of their employees because they just couldn't open, right? And I'm glad that the government really stepped in and helped provide some of the funding of the PPP loans, and even more of the CARES Act that came in and helped the unemployment, because a lot of the people who are in the service industry got really impacted. And unfortunately, we don't have the whole statistics of Asian businesses or at least restaurants who were hit badly. But we do know that we're taking an effort and a stand collectively with all the other individuals and organizations to say, hey, we're raising money to help them provide meals for our frontline workers. And that's been a very successful thing.
You're buying meals from restaurants that need the money.
Correct.
And then then donating those meals to frontline workers. So you're trying to stimulate the economy and helping people at the same time.
It's a two-way, twofold thing. And it's a blessing, because we know that they're tired and they don't have time to get a meal. And that's the whole aspect. Please, go ahead.
Go ahead. You were saying one more thing you're doing?
No, and the other thing I want to say is, hey, we collectively are offering a 10% discount for restaurants. One of the things that we know is we want to encourage people to go back and really dine and get food from these restaurants to help stimulate that aspect of helping them come back and rebuild their business. So that's one of the things that we, as a chamber on our website, you can download it and support these Asian-owned businesses, because they need your help, but even more so, they need support. And that's why it's so great that we're having this and we're rallying it together, just like the other organizations.
And I know, Debbie, you have a restaurant, Shabu House. You're still just doing takeout. When are you going to open yours up?
We are still doing takeout. We're going to open up on June 10th.
Well, hopefully you will have lots of people who maybe they can just do takeout or curbside, and that your business will be one of those that come through this stronger than ever. We certainly hope that. Mustafa, kind of talk to us a little bit about. Yes, Mustafa, kind of talk to us about. We see all the activity that the Asian American communities, just like Paul and Debbie and Chloe were talking about, are doing on the business side. And of course, we see many of our medical professionals being Asian Americans. But I feel like sometimes when we talk in the national conversation about coronavirus and COVID-19, are we being left out as a community of that conversation? Or do you think the only time we're brought into that conversation is in a negative tone because the virus got its start in China and in the Far East?
Well, I think politically, the president on downward, there are a number of people that are making it a point not to call it coronavirus, but they're calling it the Wuhan virus, or they're calling it the Chinese virus. I mean, that's a intentional way of framing the devastation of COVID-19 and trying to put the finger on someone else other than taking responsibility. So let's just put that on the table. And I want to add what we can do about that, because Debbie started a very good list, right? Debbie said, one, you have to report any hate crime or any incident, because we have to be able to count it, right? So we know what's going on. Two, she said, you got to participate with the census, and that's, again, it's helpful for our local economy. It's very important that we do that as Asian Americans. Three, she said, you got to vote, right? You got to make sure that we're changing and we're electing people that represent our value. And the fourth thing that I want to add is use your voice, because as Americans, our First Amendment in our Constitution says that we have the right to speak and speak up. So when you see an injustice, whether it's political, where somebody has said something hateful, and Chloe's got this beautiful mask, but you can't cover up, hateful rhetoric, right? You got to expose it, and you got to call people out on it. And you have to be vocal and public, because that is the most American thing we can do, and that's the best example that we can set for our children.
But do you still find that a challenge, though? Because, even many of our own parents probably told us to just be good kids and do well in school, and I guess don't rock the boat. So how do we convince more people that it's okay to rock the boat?
Tell Mustafa I told you to rock the boat. Look, I think it is taking some of our own responsibility to do that, right? This is a culture shift for us. Texas has the third largest Asian population in the United States. There's over 1 million Asian Americans, in Texas, and we're talking about Kathleen Wald, that district, maybe 17, 18% Asian American. So, there's some real numbers here. Not that, we oftentimes feel alone in the era of COVID-19, we all get isolated, but our community comes together, and I think that we have to raise our voices.
And Chief Gore, speaking of raising our voices, we've talked consistently throughout the program so far about various points where, as Asian Americans, sometimes we're reluctant to speak out, whether or not it's reporting crimes or just using our voices. What are you seeing on the ground, and what would you like to see more as in the Houston Police Department for people to do so that to keep our community safer? Because one of the other things, side effects, so to speak, no pun intended here, with the COVID-19 affecting businesses, that we're always also hearing about some property crimes increasing, some violent crimes increasing. And just like all communities, we care about public safety and what should we do. And as we move forward and as we start to open back up and we encourage people to visit the businesses and make sure that our small family-owned businesses here in our community succeed, what can we all do to make sure that's done safer and make your jobs as police officers easier, if that's possible?
Well, yeah, y'all are talking about very good points here. And the one I like to re-stress is also, hey, if you of course feel like a crime's been committed against you, please report it. If you ever have a doubt, just call us. We have our non-emergency number, and there's also different ways of reporting those things. They're all online, HoustonPolice.org. But let me tell you this. We did come up with an interesting stat when I was obtaining some information for our town hall here. We're just curious to find out, hey, how does last year's numbers compare to year to date when it comes to Asians filing police reports? And we kind of looked at it in terms of the Bel Air corridor. We also did it citywide. Actually, the numbers are higher for Asians. So if you just, that's just based on that. There might be other factors in play there, but, just based on the numbers alone, Asians are still filing police reports. Now, getting back to your question about, hey, when businesses do come back online, we're getting ready. The police department, we've been open. We've always been open during this entire crisis, this pandemic. And, we're anticipating, we can't wait until things, come up, and of course, safely. And the numbers are picking up. Actually, calls for service did drop off in the beginning. They have picked up. Unfortunately, when people are together at home a lot, you do have those incidences of family violence. You do see the homicide numbers are up now because it also affected the drug supply. You heard Chief Acevedo earlier today talk on the news about our crime numbers. But hey, let's talk about, the businesses. When y'all do reopen, of course, we're going to be the Houston Police Department. We're going to be an equal partner in all this with you. When it comes time to, engage with us again, to the degree that when y'all were still in business, please do. We have a very active and engaging team out in the Chinatown area. Actually, my cousin, Jimmy Chow, or Officer Chow, and Sergeant Nguyen, they're very engaging with the businesses and the citizens out there. Also, I had a chat with them about, hey, do you hear this on the ground out there as far as, these type of crimes, being committed, or as far as the rhetoric or the negative Asian American? that really wasn't a topic of conversation. Again, I think it's kind of hidden, but I do like it in terms of when we do count these things. And like you, Debbie, you said earlier, you pointed me to those websites where you can report it, and those numbers do reflect that those things are occurring out there. And when they do occur, I want us to report it so that we can bring these things to the table and bring attention to it.
And I think, to your point, Chief, Houston is a very diverse community, and even though some rare incidents of Asian American anti-Asian racism do occur, like we recently last month featured a woman screaming at the owner of Vietopia, a restaurant right outside the TV station, about what happened, that by and large Houstonians are very kind, generous, and loving people from all backgrounds, and we certainly appreciate that as well. As we move toward opening back up, Chloe, can you on the business side? I guess do you feel like your experience has been a little different because you're in fashion, you're not in what might be considered traditional. You're not located in Asia Town. You may not run some sort of food establishment, so you don't have a traditional experience of how this COVID-19 may have impacted your business. But how will you kind of move forward as we open up? And we didn't have prom this year, for example. Maybe not. You didn't have a lot of those kinds of customers coming in. But how do you see yourself changing, or maybe staying the same as we move forward?
Oh, no, I've changed since March 18th. So when we started making masks and started donating, it started already changing because once we shut down, what do you do? I mean, this is my 20th year. And to suddenly close down after 20 years is a very emotional thing. So we already pivoted. So we literally, all we been doing is making masks for the last 8 weeks. And I think any business now, you just have to pivot. If you don't change your focus right now, you're not going to stay around. This is the time of change in every platform. You have to be on social media. You have to have a clear message. And for me, I think we just actually started opening this Monday. We were doing curbside picked up, and we chose actually not to open. We was actually allowed to open because we wanted to be really careful about it, careful for my staff and the community. And surprisingly, our sales was actually really good this week. We had clients coming in. It actually surprised myself, but let's be honest, the majority of stuff I'm selling are masses. And that's going to be the part of our fashion and part of our business. And even when I'm designing and thinking my next step, I have to think, what do clients want now? And I think for me as a fashion designer in the fashion industry, it actually brought it back to the point which I kind of want it to be, where it's less merchandise, but more quality and more stuff that people actually need versus what they want and being wasteful. So I think that's a clear and a good thing that actually is happening to the fashion industry. For the Asian, the restaurant, I really wish for me to help is to literally have more, for me, when I'm looking for a Chinese restaurant, I wish there's a website that had all the information. Like you said, when you're trying to find there's not enough information in Bel Air. It's so segregated, and it's such a small restaurant here. I wish somebody, Asian Chamber of Commerce, probably you have it, but have it where you can click in and see all of them. Instead of just going to Yelp, it'll be great, because I would like to know which restaurants are open so I can support them. I went to Tan Tan. I went to my favorite Asian restaurant, but I called first, and there's one that I thought was open, but it was actually closed. It actually shocked me. So I think, we just need them to get on live, get on a TV commercial, really let everybody know they're here, and they're open. I think it's all great that we're doing this, but we need to be on, we need to run a commercial. I think, I realized, because after donating, masks to Texas Children's Hospital, Ron McDonald, I was able to be on every TV station doing a story on me. And once the story was on TV, the sales increased and the donation came in. I mean, it was the power of television and social media. Let's have a competition, best house special fried rice, and have a competition and get the food blogger out there. It's a silly idea, but it could work, just get them out there, get the people out there. And you know what Mustafa said, it's about, we all have a voice, but we also have friends who have voices. And so we're Asian America, but we're not alone. We have a lot of community people that loves us. I think that's what we also have to remember. We don't have to do this alone.
And Paul, did you know that you're now supposed to start a food competition of all? This is your new assignment.
We've already have a whole list of restaurants in that Salute page, and so you can see a lot of the Asian restaurants who are standing behind it. And by standing behind it, I want you guys to support it and go to those restaurants. Can I add? I want to add some stuff that Chloe said. I totally agree with what she said. She said a very key word, pivot, and the whole aspect of being creative. We understand that some of the biggest challenges is capital and customer behavior, and helping understand customers and feeling confident in coming into their stores. And and one of the things that I think a lot of business who are thriving right now is because they've been creative. They took a whole new concept and ran with it in a different way that allowed customers to say, okay, I understand, and I want to support, and I feel comfortable and safe, and I want to go to particularly your store or your business. So I think businesses in any business, right, not necessarily restaurants, but having a safe environment, a trust. Social media, what she said, and she's the guru of social media, I'm going to say with Chloe, but even more
she'll give you a workshop in the Asian Chamber.
Even using the platform of just marketing your business goes a long way in saying, hey, I'm open, I'm doing these different things, it's safe, come. And one of the things I've also heard, two things I want to give an example. This morning we had an SBA call, and Tim Jeffcoat, the director of the SBA here, local
and that's a Small Business Administration.
Yes, SBA. And he said one thing, these businesses, they may not have funds, but they're sitting on inventory, and that inventory is cash. And you know what? Let's clear this inventory so they can have cash flow coming in. And one example he gave a restaurant that had a big wine cellar, and people weren't drinking wine. So what he did, he helped clear it out. He basically maybe sold it at cost just to clear it out so they had cash flow coming in, and that really helped him survive. So those are really creative ways to just say, hey, look, you know what? We have these things. Let's clear it out. Let's get cash flow in, and let's survive in those things. And you know what? People are doing that. The other one I want to give an example of is customers really need to understand what businesses are going through. Let me explain. A customer comes in, it's really difficult because the business owner is taking too long to fulfill his order. But you know what? He's making a lot of accommodations to help make it safe in order to be able to fulfill these orders. And I think the customer and in whole needs to understand what's going on so that they can say, okay, you know what? I want to get patient to this business owner because I understand what he's going through. I want to be here to support him. I want to be able to say, yeah, he's doing a good job, and I want to continue going back to and become a loyal customer for him. And that is how a lot of the community can help businesses who are hurting and support them, and just be able to tag them on social media and follow them. Because if we're engaged, they're understanding that people will be safely coming back and supporting the businesses, and that across the board. And so that's how I say enjoy that and be part of that movement.
I know I'm missing some of my favorite Asian restaurants. We've been doing a lot of takeout. Hey, Mustafa, when you talk to the people you advise, whether it's government or local agencies, how do you tell them to make that pivot as we move forward, both to ensure their survival? Because so many folks out there in our communities are trying to figure out how to survive and do so well coming up, because we don't have a vaccine, and it might be a long time before we do.
I think sometimes it's important to know the scale of where we are. I mean, unemployment is projected to go up to almost 32%. During the Great Depression, unemployment was 25%. Houston is going to be impacted in multiple fronts, right? Just kind of like the Asian American community, we were talking about double-edged sword. We've not only just had COVID-19 and the economic downturn because of it, but we've had the biggest oil crash that we've had in many, many years. So both oil and this, you're going to see a real estate downturn coming very soon behind this stuff. So the economy itself, if we don't get creative and figure out what pivot's going to launch us, then we're likely not to survive. And so when Chloe said, I looked at what was needed, which was masks, right? The other part that she said I think was incredibly valuable was in providing goods and services that people need, right? That COVID-19 showed us that the cracks in society. And one of the cracks we had were, there was some abundance. And so people were a little bit more spendthrift. Our consumer spending was up. But as that economy starts to contract, people are going to, stick to the basic stuff that they need, not necessarily all the tangential that was there. So as we rethink about our businesses, I think we have to be more creative and figuring out what is the need of today and what will be the need in the coming years, and focusing specifically on that. And we have to move quickly. There's another thing about this pandemic. Like when you were seeing that the cities and states that shut down faster have a lot, and by days, right? If our county judge had waited and let the rodeo go for another 3 days or 4 days, imagine what it would be like here now. So acting with some speed and making that pivot to what people need in our business is going to be critical.
And Debbie, I know you've got to you've been trying to keep your restaurant surviving, but tell me about the what OCA and some of the advocacy groups who are sort of on the ground. What are they looking at as we move forward for something that could be 1 or 2 years before we get viable vaccines that would and who knows if we'll ever go back to the way we are? Probably not. So how are those advocacy groups kind of looking at in a forward-thinking way of how it will impact our community?
Well, I would say two of the immediate needs that we see in the community, right? One is food security. Most people don't think about people who are undocumented, who don't have status, or who may have a visa, but just having a visa doesn't allow them to be able to receive a stimulus check, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to apply for unemployment. So there is a real need right now in the Asian American community of just food security. So OCA Greater Houston, in partnership actually with State Representative Jean Wu, has taken the lead and is going to be doing monthly food distributions, specifically targeting the AAPI community, especially low-income and undocumented families. So we're figuring out ways to help people get food, essentially, right? Especially for people who lack transportation. And I really want to thank the Houston Food Bank for working with us to do that. Secondly, we are working on, I want to thank all of our community partners and some of the local foundations and individuals who are investing in bystander trainings. So we are looking to offer bystander trainings every month through the rest of the year. It's a preventive measure, right? And it's not where you're going to sit through some lecture, somebody telling you this is what a hate crime is and this is why you shouldn't do it. It's really a much more empowering type of training where it's allowing someone, if you are a witness to some kind of verbal harassment, it's a training, basic 1 hour, that allows you to feel empowered to be able to step in and de-escalate that situation, to intervene in a safe manner. So we're looking at providing those trainings virtually, literally every month. We're also expanding our film screenings. Happy Fest, which is the annual Houston Asian American Pacific Islander Film Festival, that is becoming virtual. So that is in June, and then we plan to continue to screen the Asian Americans documentary every month to every other month, along with other films. But again, I just want to circle back. Outside of those immediate needs, I can't stress enough how important it is, if you are a victim or you are witnessing something, encourage the victim to please report it, okay? To the police, report it on one of the 4 websites, AAPIHateCrimes.org. Report it, make sure it gets documented. Secondly, please fill out the census. We want to make sure that everybody fills out the census. The census basically means everyone who gets counted, you are bringing $15,700 of tax money that you've already paid. Our community has already paid this tax money. It's a way to get this money to come back to our local community, right? So it comes back to your neighborhood, your schools, your hospitals, your roads. $15,700. That's a cheap car, right? So a family of 4, that's like $60,000. And then lastly, if you are a citizen, register to go vote. If you are unhappy with how things are being handled, or you are concerned about how Asian Americans are being viewed, then you need to speak up, and the best way is to register and go vote. That is power. if people recognize that the Asian American community fills out the census, we're going to get counted, we're going to go out and vote, then policymakers will listen up to say, oh, well, what are the concerns and issues of your community?
Yeah, when you show up in force at the ballot box, it's amazing how fast politicians who make the laws pay attention to how what your thoughts are on some of the laws and legislation.
Because otherwise,
they
people
are
just think, oh, you think everything's okay, right? And you may not necessarily think everything's okay, but they're not going to know unless you actually go and vote.
Well, we know that Asian Americans, especially, have lots of opinion, but a lot of times they're just shared on WeChat, which is an app with each other and not necessarily with the folks really making an impact in the sense of registering vote and census. And those are always good points. We have about 8-9 minutes left. It was Chloe Dow's suggestion that we have some clothing thoughts with everyone. So I'll let her go last. Everybody gets clothing thoughts. We'll start with Chief Gore, and Chief, you can give us some final thoughts. And a viewer, Patrick, just wanted to talk about, wanted you to mention, talking about for the police role is there are, if folks are concerned, there's also mental health resources. You guys have a mental health team out there. So you don't actually, it's not just about being physically harmed that you might need the help of law enforcement. And any other thoughts, Chief, as we wrap up? Everybody gets about a minute and a half as we head toward the end of this hour.
So just real quick on our CIT, or Crisis Intervention Team, or Mental Health Division, we have one of the most robust and best mental health divisions, I think, for any large police agency. So, we have many response capabilities there. We also have a group at our dispatch center who handles those type of calls. Hey, before I go up, I just want to say thanks very much for allowing the Houston Police Department, allowing me to be a part of this conversation. As we all talk here, we're all Asian Americans here. Yeah, and I'm just grateful that that we're blessed, we're able to survive during this time. And I'm also thankful, thank God, that the police department, we're the 5th largest in the country. Knock on wood, we have not had any deaths in our department. Sadly, the Harris County Sheriff's Department had 1 death this weekend, and we've had 50 people absent now. We had about 650 people who have been affected on our department who has had to take off. And major takeaways that I want to give from everyone from the Houston Police Department's perspective before we get off tonight is that, hey, these type of incidences are occurring out there, but please, please, please report them, but do not let them be a factor in your being scared to step out. And if you do see anything, report it. Trust the facts, not the rumors that you hear or whatever you see online. And the Houston Police Department, we're here to support you. Please contact us. And also I want to say thank you to all the groups out there who have contributed and given to us. And I think you guys have referenced to it. Houston's a very charitable and giving city. And, you guys have given us things from food to masks to actually some clothes too. And actually, Suu Kyi organization just donated 10,000 masks the other day. And I was able to fortunately take part of that. So again, thanks very much. Thanks very much for the engaging conversation. And I look forward to more conversations like this and to all of us getting well and surviving together.
I hear you, Chief. Thank you so much. Paul, you want to offer us a few final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. It's a privilege to be here and to be part of among leaders who are just sharing what they know about the Asian community and giving back. 3 things I want to say. One is support Asiatown. There's a great richness and diversity that probably 75% of Houstonians don't even know about. And just go there, support that. Google that. Google places that you want to try out. There's a 10% off that we're offering on our website from businesses. But encourage that. They need your help. And this is an aspect where we can come together and support that. Where there's so many diversities, and if Houston's the most diverse, that's a very diverse central area that you have to check out. Second thing is, this whole aspect is people living in fear of the coronavirus. Part of it is to have faith. One is have faith in God, but have faith in also leaders in our government, and even have faith in the PPEs that are going to protect you, right? This whole aspect of it is saying, hey, use that and saying that, the system works, and trust that the system works so that we can all get together. Houston went through a lot of different ups and downs. We had several hurricanes, and even more so the oil and gas industry and the energy crisis that would happen. But you know what? Houston survived. And the whole aspect of together as a collective body, we can definitely move on and get through this together. And the last thing is, hey, businesses, let's collaborate together, and that's why the Chamber is here. That's why the Chamber is actually celebrating our 30th next month in June, being 30 years, and we've been here as a collective whole to support. So one of the things is get educated, like Chloe said, go out there and pivot, and even more so, go out and market your business, and we're here to help you. So please, join us, come and see what all about, and even more so, help each other. That's the whole aspect of being Asian and this community together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula. And Debbie, any final thoughts? Voting, census, what else?
Voting, census, report to AAPI hate crimes. If you're interested in supporting our food distribution efforts, and if you're interested in supporting, bystander trainings, right? Anyone who has had a kid who's ever been bullied, I encourage you to please contact OCA and contribute to supporting us to be able to provide those services. And lastly, please support Asian American businesses. Please support the businesses in Chinatown, in Asiatown. And I would ask that, everyone seriously consider, and business owners too, give back to the community, right? Give back to the Asian American nonprofits who are out there doing this type of work and speaking out on behalf of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mustafa, your thoughts as we wrap up the evening.
Well, my first, thank you and Channel 13 for convening this wonderful conversation, and my panelists for all the great work that they're doing. Look, I think that we've talked about a lot of things. One thing that we should also talk about that Chief started to, which is, what we're all feeling. There's an emotional vulnerability that we all feel while we're socially distancing. And we've seen domestic violence go up. We've seen a lot of things that we just don't like to see grow. So reach out to each other. I sit on the board of Olive Branch, a family services organization that provides mental health services. So reach out to others, reach out to your friends, reach out to professional services, because I think it's really important that we come through this stronger and more together.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. And Chloe, since you gave me the idea of having clothing thoughts, you get the last clothing thought.
Thank you so much, Maya. And I want to thank you for inviting me to this panel. And thank you, everyone, for really being informative and for me to learn a lot from you guys also. And I want to do a closing thought because for me, I've been very, very fortunate that I will be able to share my skill and help my community. But that does not make me special. I think everybody has heart and their intelligence to share and help your community. And especially the food blogger, this is the moment where you need to step in. This is even my mom. She has a Facebook account. This is where I think through the power of social media, through the power of even the phone call, the old phone call up and support each other. And it doesn't have to be through money. It's just a little bit of time and energy. And through this power of marketing and your voice and connecting with each other, I think this is how we're all going to survive this.
Thank you so much, Chloe. I just want to say it's been a wonderful evening for the last hour to speak with some of our community leaders, Houston Police Chief Assistant Chief Henry Gao, Debbie Chin, Mustafa Tamiz, Paul Gore, and of course, designer Chloe Dow. There are so many issues that are important in our community, in the Asian American community, and it was great to spend an hour in the month of May, Asian American Civic Heritage Month, to talk about some of those things that really impact our community as we go through this global pandemic together right here in the greater Houston region. ABC13 and our Community Affairs Department proud to bring these important conversations into the media sphere, whether it's on air, online, or on all our digital platforms. This wraps up our virtual town hall for tonight. Have no fear. There will be more town halls down the line as we engage all of our community in different aspects and have these very important conversations. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank our panelists. We hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.